Hello again, everybody, and welcome to, I believe this is going to be the first time I've ever done this. This is a top 5 list. I don't generally tend to do these, but somebody had asked about something specific about caltrops in one of my other D&D videos. So I decided that I was going to, instead of just talking about caltrops for an hour, I was going to do a top 5 or top 10 or something like that list of underused items in 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. There is a section in the player's handbook called equipment. And most people only look at 2 pages in that entire chapter. They are the page that lists the different armors that you can have and the page that lists the different weapons that you can have. And that's it. People don't really look at the next page right after the weapons, which is a list of various items. Some of them don't have like really practical uses or anything. Like they have magnifying glasses, and they list all the different focuses that druids can have or wizards can have and things like that. So they don't really change gameplay much. But there are a few items there that are constantly just forgotten that are massively useful. So this is going to be my top 5 underused 5th edition items. I'm going to start at the bottom and work my way up. And I'm actually going to start with an honorable mention. This item is just not quite as useful as it could be, but it's still an item that people don't even realize is in the PHP, and that is the hunting trap. Hunting trap is basically it's a bear trap. It's a thing. It's got a pressure plate. It's got jaws that clamp together. And if you attach it to something solid, it basically means that an enemy that steps on it, not only does he take some damage, but he can't move more than 3 feet away because the chain that is attached to the hunting trap only is 3 feet long. So it's a way to basically grapple someone without having to grapple them. And for melee fighters and things like that, this can be an incredibly debilitating thing. It also forces them to use their action in order to open it. I've talked before about the idea of action economy in 5th edition being very, very important. And forcing someone to use their action to deal with something is a big deal. The only reason it's just an honorable mention is because, first of all, you have to have something to attach it to for it to be actually useful. Like you have to drive an iron spike into the ground, or you have to have something heavy that it can attach to. So if that doesn't exist, it's not that useful. And also the DC for saving against it is just a DC 13. A lot of these items that have DCs don't have incredibly high DCs, so they are kind of situationally useful. And this one, because of all those things, doesn't quite make it into the top 5, but I did want to mention it. So, number 5, holy water / acid. I built a character that I actually still play in the Adventure League when I get a chance to. That was an homage to Castlevania. And because of that, he was a whip-wielding ranger because those abilities fit most with what I wanted him to be able to do. And in order to better emulate Castlevania and one of the Belmonts, I made sure that he carried around things like throwing knives, throwing axes, and holy water. Because those are sub-weapons in Castlevania. And I realized at that point, a lot of people, first of all, aren't aware that holy water and acid are even in the game, and aren't aware of how useful they can be. The thing with holy water and acid, they basically do kind of the same thing in slightly different ways. Holy water, you throw it at a creature. If it's undead or a fiend, it will take 2d6 radiant damage if it gets hit by it. Acid does the exact same thing, but it just does 2d6 acid damage, and it doesn't matter what creature type it is. So it's not a whole lot of damage, to be honest. But The reason that they're both on here is their specific damage types have very specific uses. Acid is one of the things that will stop a troll from regenerating. In order to kill a troll, you have to reduce it to 0 hit points, and you have to hit it with either fire or acid. Otherwise, at the beginning of its turn, it will regain hit points, it will come back, and it will do massive amounts of damage. So having a vial or two of acid on you means that if you do come across trolls, and there's actually there's a ton of different kinds of trolls, and they all are nasty to fight against. If you do come across a troll, you have this ability to hit them with something. And holy water does the same thing with certain undead. There are certain undead that regain hit points at the beginning of their turn, unless they're hit by radiant damage. Or sometimes fire, depending on the monster. So both of these things are really, really useful in certain situations, and they're things that people don't think about. You know, if you don't have someone that can reliably deal radiant damage and you're fighting like a wight or a vampire where they're regaining hit points every turn, it turns into a much, much more difficult fight, whereas just having a couple vials of holy water or acid on you can definitely change things, depending on what you're fighting. The other interesting thing about holy water is you don't actually have to buy it. You can actually have any paladin or cleric can make their own holy water. It actually costs the same as buying it. It costs 25 gold to buy holy water. It costs 25 gold worth of powdered silver in order to make holy water. However, powdered silver is not the most difficult thing in the world to have, and that also means that, you know, if you're in the middle of a dungeon or something like that, you're running out of holy water or something because you're fighting a lot of undead, you can have your paladin or your cleric make you holy water. It does take an hour to do it per vial of holy water, but still kind of useful, kind of interesting. If it would be higher up on the list if it didn't cost so much for paladins and clerics to make it. Like if it was cheaper to make than it was to buy, I mean, that would be a major advantage of having a cleric or a paladin in the party, is that they can churn out, you know, a vial or two of holy water every night. And 25 gold at low levels, 25 gold is a lot. Once you get to probably about level 7 or 8, 25 gold is nothing. You have got tons of money. You can make holy water until you are blue in the face. So very, very useful there. Acid, the same thing, but again, the difficulty with acid is it's possible, depending on your campaign setting, that it might be a regulated thing where it's hard to find, or you have to buy it through the black market. And again, you have to find somewhere that actually sells it. Not everyone is going to sell acid. The next thing up, number 4, is Alchemist's Fire and Oil. This is another thing that a lot of people don't think about, but can be incredibly useful in different ways. And you're going to notice that as we go up the list, that the next one up is also going to have, you know, they do basically the same thing in different ways. Alchemist Fire is, you know, basically a vial of this stuff that burns instantly when the vial bursts. And so what you do is you throw it on someone and then they're set on fire. They take damage at the beginning of their turn until they put the fire out, which costs an action. So first things first, it's extra damage. It's fire damage, which is very useful. Like I said, it works on undead sometimes. It works on trolls. You know, it's a very, very useful thing. And again, based on that action economy, it forces them to either continue to take damage every turn, which 1d4 may not sound like a whole lot of damage, but it's enough that it will it can change things. You know, 1d damage or 1d4 damage for one turn. You know, on average, you're going to be getting between 2 and 3 damage out of it. So Yeah, in general, an extra 2 damage for one turn isn't that big, but then 2 turns, that would turn into 5. 4 turns, it turns into an extra 10 damage. And keep going and going using averages. It gets worse and worse and worse. Now, if I remember correctly, it doesn't last. It obviously would not last forever. And I'm actually going to look at it right now so that I don't tell you guys the wrong information. Actually, it just says on a hit, the target takes 1d4 fire damage at the start of each of its turns. It doesn't actually end. It's there until they die or they put it out, which again, forcing them to use an action to put out the fire changes the action economy. And if they don't want to be on fire the entire time, they're going to do that. Oil is a slightly different mechanism. If you throw oil on a target and they're hit by an attack that does fire damage, it does an extra 5 fire damage. And they stay covered in oil, I think, for a minute. And if I remember correctly, again, I'm going to look this up before telling you guys incorrect information, because I know you guys will just freak out if I give the wrong information. So again, it doesn't specifically stay in here incredibly clearly, but basically the oil takes about a minute for it to dry up. So as long as they are hit by a fire attack within the next minute, they're going to take an extra 5 damage, which again doesn't seem like a lot, but can be useful. The other thing you can use oil to do is you can actually pour it on the ground. It covers an area 5 foot by 5 foot, and then you can light that on fire, and that will control where people move, and that will control help you to control the battle, bottleneck people, things like that. Because even though it's only doing 5 damage per turn, that's still something that's going to influence people. Okay, maybe I don't want to stand in the fire. Whether or not it's a ton of damage, they're probably going to think, no, that would be a bad idea. So yeah, both alchemist fire and oil, which can also be used together. So you cover somebody in oil and then throw alchemist fire at them. Then you're doing 1d4 plus 5 damage. And yeah, super useful. Something that a lot of people don't think about. I generally tend to think alchemist fire is a little bit more useful than oil, but both of them have their uses, and they both technically do kind of the same thing. So, and they're both things that a lot of people have no idea exist in 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. The next one up, number 3, is going to be caltrops and ball bearings. Now, the original post that inspired me to make this was somebody going, hey, can you please do a video on caltrops? And let people know that they're more than just pointy things that you step on. Yes and no. I mean, by definition, they are kind of pointy things that you can step on. But as far as uses in D&D, they're remarkably useful. Especially if you use these. A lot of these things, like caltrops, ball bearings, oil, the hunting trap, they're great for setting up ambushes and for fights that if you're going to be more tactical, if you're going to be something like you send a party member forward, get people's attention, and have the party member run back. Things like this that take a little bit more planning and stuff like that, caltrops and ball bearings are definitely going to help you out in that specific sense. So caltrops are literally these items that are designed to damage your opponent's feet. The interesting thing about caltrops is when you throw them, they only cover a 5 foot by 5 foot area in 5th edition. But if anybody walks through that area, they have to make a DC, I believe it's 13 dex save. And if they fail that, their speed is reduced to 0. They stop moving and they take 1 point of damage. Until they heal at least 1 hit point. And again, I'm going to look it up before I say the wrong thing. Their speed is reduced by 10 feet. So again, dealing with this action economy and stuff like that, what it does is somebody coming towards you stops in their tracks and is incapable of completing their move. You have just removed one of the actions that they have. Again, playing around with that action economy like I mentioned before. And then their speed is reduced by 10 feet until somebody heals them for at least 1 hit point. So that's a secondary action or bonus action or something that somebody on their team is going to have to spend so that this person can be at full fighting force. Slowing someone down is remarkably useful because you can use that to make attacks and then keep moving away. If you use reach weapons and stuff like that, you can poke them and then move further away than they can travel, poke them again, move further away. It's really, really useful to kind of run people around. Ball bearings are slightly different. They actually cover a 10-foot area instead of a 5-foot area. And instead of reducing the speed to 0, they knock the target prone. Now, because they cover a wider area, the DC for them is lower. It's a DC 10 dexterity saving throw. But for enemies that don't have good dexterity, of which there are a decent amount. Most enemies tend to have an okay dexterity, but if they're not trained in dexterity saving throws, you're still going to have them only having like a +2 or a +3 to the check. So you still have a pretty decent chance of, even at a DC 10, of them being knocked prone. And depending on how much movement they have, they may not be able to get up that turn. In order to get up from a prone state, it costs half of your movement speed. So if they move, like if they have a 30-foot movement speed and they move 20 feet, enter the ball bearing area, and then fall over, they are prone until their next turn, which again gives melee attacks advantage against them. It actually gives them disadvantage on their attacks. And again, plays around with that action economy. They now have to use half of their movement to stand back up. And then if they move again, while they're still in that area, they still have to make the save again, unless they're moving at half speed, which, due to the fact that they've already spent half of their movement, means they're only probably going to be able to move 5 feet at half speed. They'll move 1 square at half speed and still be in that area. So, again, this is another great way to control the battlefield. Ball bearings are a little bit more useful to use in the middle of battle, because you can be running and just kind of sprinkle them behind you as you're running, whereas caltrops are a little bit better used when you're kind of preparing an ambush or something like that, because they won't be expecting them. Whereas ball bearings is a large enough area that you can pour them in front of a door or something like that, or a place that's only 10 feet wide, and force every single person that goes through there to make that check or fall over, which can be incredibly useful. So, number 2, manacles. Manacles are so freaking useful. Nobody ever uses them. And it absolutely shocks me as to why. Manacles themselves are again, relatively basic. They are simply, they're handcuffs. That's all they are. You basically use them to restrain a small or medium creature. And you can actually find manacles for larger creatures, like giants will have manacles for giants and stuff like that. Normal humans aren't really going to be able to pick them up and stuff like that because they're massive, but manacles are the perfect item for interrogations and the perfect item for times when you need to keep an enemy alive for some reason, but you don't want to have to deal with them. The nice thing about manacles is in order to break out of them, you either need a DC 20 dexterity check or a DC 20 strength check. Or if they have access to thieves' tools, which if you've bound them with the manacles, they shouldn't, they can make a DC 15 thieves' tools check. But all of these are relatively high checks, and as long as they have them, they are extremely limited in what they can do. They're restrained. They're incapable of doing a lot of things. It doesn't specifically mention the words restrained or grappled or anything like that. Any of the status effects that are officially listed in 5th edition. So in general, it's going to be up to your DM to kind of decide exactly what the manacles prevent them from doing. If you put manacles on their legs, it may reduce their speed to only 10 feet or something like that. If you put manacles on their arms, it may give them disadvantage on all their attack rolls and things like that, or other things. There are specific forms of manacles that are used in places that highly regulate magic. In Mulmaster, during the 2nd season of the D&D Adventure League, they actually mentioned that arcane magic, using arcane magic inside the city limits is illegal in Mulmaster unless you belong to the Cloaks. So if anybody casts a spell within the city limits, either they have to join the Cloaks, which is this kind of secret police kind of thing. They're not a nice group of people at all. Or they will be arrested, and depending on the offense, they can have anything from just fines and jail time to they cut off your hands to prevent you from performing magic. One of the things they list in the documentation kind of describing Mulmaster is they have a special type of manacle that they use where they actually tie the caster's fingers so that they can't do the somatic components of any spells. It prevents them from casting any spell that requires somatic components. And because their hands are tied and everything, it's also going to prevent them from using any material components. So it actually limits spellcasters to verbal spells only, of which there are not a lot. So, that... excuse me. So manacles can be really, really useful, especially if you need to interrogate someone, if you need to keep somebody alive, if you need to transport someone who's less than thrilled. A DC 20 check is going to be difficult for just about anyone. And if you can combine that with things like poison or something like that where they get disadvantage, you have a very, very effective means of controlling an enemy or an ally. The other thing that you can use these manacles for is if an ally gets charmed by a bad guy and you don't want to kill them, there are certain charm effects and stuff like that that just continue going on. Gaius is one example where it works for a month. So using something like manacles can be a great way to help bide your time while you find a cure for it, whether that's using greater restoration or whatever you need to do. So yeah, they're not just for enemies; they're also fairly useful for incapacitating allies too, if you need to. And that brings me to my number 1: poison. Poison is probably one of the things that I'm most shocked that people don't use more often, because bad guys use it all the time to amazing effect. There are a lot of monsters that have, like if you fight Drow in 5th edition, the Drow stat block for most of them, if they use a hand crossbow or any sort of ranged weapon, it will have Drow poison on it, which is a DC, I can't remember what the DC, but it's a Constitution saving throw. All the poisons are Constitution saves. And if you fail it, you are poisoned for an hour and unconscious while you are poisoned. So the poisoned condition in 5th edition, what it does is basically it gives you disadvantage on just about everything. All ability checks, attack rolls, all that stuff has disadvantage. So the ability to inflict the poisoned condition is massively useful. Giving your opponent disadvantage on saving throws, giving your opponent disadvantage on attack rolls and stuff like that is incredibly useful. Especially if you're fighting humanoids or creatures that have classes. Things like Rogue's sneak attack doesn't work if they have disadvantage on the attack. It doesn't matter if they have an ally within 5 feet or anything like that. If you give them disadvantage on their attack roll, they can't use their sneak attack feature. So the same can be used against enemies as well. There are enemies that have the sneak attack feature. I've used them on some of the groups that I DM, and they're really, really fun because it's kind of a really interesting way to kind of show the players that, oh, by the way, you are not the only heroes in existence. You are not the only adventurers in the world. There are other adventurers, and sometimes the other adventurers are not doing the same things that you are. Sometimes you and the other adventurers are going to be on different sides. And having to deal with other adventuring parties is an interesting way. You can build rivalries and stuff like that. So poisons are brilliant. In the PHB, there is only one poison listed. It's called Basic Poison. It's a relatively low DC, if I remember correctly. Poison Basic. DC 10 Constitution saving throw, or take 1d4 poison damage. So it's a relatively simple, small thing, but it's not incredibly expensive, and it's great for low-level stuff to just give you... It takes an action to put on a weapon or to coat 3 pieces of ammunition. So for ranged attackers, it's actually remarkably useful, because they can coat 3 arrows for a low-level character is going to last them for 3 turns. And they're going to do an additional d4 damage with each arrow. There aren't a ton of, especially low-level enemies, there aren't going to be a ton that have really high constitution scores. It doesn't happen until you start dealing with things like giants and stuff like that. So even a DC 10 constitution save is going to be failed on a fairly regular basis. However, where poisons become really, really effective is when you go to the DMG, the Dungeon Master's Guide. They actually have a list of, I'm actually going to look and see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, I think it's 14 if my math is correct. 14 different poisons that you can use, and they are massively useful. Most of them inflict the poison condition plus other things. Some will make people blind, some will render them unconscious, some will do just straight damage. But they're really, really interesting. They have a bunch of different ways that they have to be used. Like, some of them require you to eat them, some of them require you to inhale them, some of them only do their damage when you inflict damage. You put them on a weapon and you stick somebody with the weapon. And there's a couple that just require skin contact. So you could have like a leather glove, you could put the poison on it, and all you'd have to do is, grab their shoulder, slap them across the face or something, and the poison would be transferred. Some of my more favorite poisons are, first things first, drow poison is an injury poison. You have to put it on a weapon and it has to pierce their skin. But it's massively useful. It's a DC 13 con save, and if you are hit by it, you are poisoned for an hour, and while you are poisoned, you are unconscious. Drow poison is remarkably useful when the party is fighting drow. It's always a lot of fun for the drow poison to take effect, because what it does is it effectively takes one of the combatants out of combat. Which again affects that action economy. They can be woken up. It doesn't cure the poison condition for them to be woken up, so they're still poisoned for an hour. They still have disadvantage and all that stuff. They can't be woken up by just shaking them vigorously or anything like that. But that's going to take an action. It's going to take someone else's action to do that. So again, by using something like Drow Poison, you are changing the action economy. You are forcing them to waste actions waking up their allies, or have an ally just completely taken out of combat while you deal with everybody else. So that one's really, really good. There's two kind of really interesting ones that are inhaled. You have Essence of Ether and Malice. So Essence of Ether is a DC 15. They're both DC 15 Constitution saving throws. The difference is Essence of Ether. They're poisoned for 8 hours and are unconscious for that 8 hours. Whereas Malice is they're only poisoned for 1 hour, but they are blinded while they are poisoned. So something like that could be relatively simple if, because it doesn't really mention a whole lot about the poison itself, as far as like for inhaled poison. These poisons are powders or gases that take effect when they are inhaled. A single dose fills a 5-foot cube. So basically with these, you could argue that they're powders that you could just blow into someone's face, or they could be in a vial that you could break, and it would fill up a 5-foot area, and the person inside it would be knocked unconscious for 8 hours or be blinded for an hour. Like I said, with the unconscious ones in general, they can be woken up by being shook vigorously or being stabbed or taking any sort of damage, but they still have that poison condition. And being poisoned for 8 hours is a big deal. That's 8 hours of everything having disadvantage. So both of those, interesting, and again, they're inhaled poisons, so you don't actually have to stab somebody with them, you just have to inhale them. Oil of Taggart is a contact poison. Again, that's one where you can like spread on a glove and just slap somebody, and it works. It's a DC 13 Constitution save, and the poison lasts for 24 hours. And while they're poisoned, they're unconscious. So again, another thing where it's a long-lasting condition. It's not something that's incredibly difficult to do. You just have to get skin contact with this poison. And again, there are a lot of creatures that don't have massively high Constitution scores. So DC 13, especially at lower levels, means they're going to be failing it quite often. And then some of the higher ones, the DC 15s and stuff like that, like those are going to be very, very effective. You also have specific poisons that you can harvest from animals. You have purple worm poison, you have serpent venom poison, and you have wyvern poison. They have different DCs. Serpent venom is a DC 11, wyvern goes up to 15, and purple worm goes up to 19. The way that you get these poisons is you actually harvest it from the animals. So if you fight a wyvern or wyvern, however you want to pronounce it, you fight a poisonous, what is it called? A giant poisonous snake. Or if you fight a purple worm, somebody can try and extract some of the poison. You apply it to your weapon, and then it does a lot of damage. Like purple worm does 12d6 poison damage. Even serpent venom, the easy one, is going to do 3d6 poison damage, and wyvern is going to do 7d6 poison damage. So these are ways to add a significant amount of damage onto already damaging attacks. So things like rogues should be using poisons. They really, really should. Anyone that gets, just like one attack, or, they're not built to do, a lot of small attacks. They're built to do one big attack. Poisons can really, really change how the battle is going for you. So, and again, most people don't think about using them. They think about magic items like a dagger of venom where you can click it and it puts a poison on your weapon. They don't think about the fact that they can create their own dagger of venom by just carrying around vials of poison. Now, again, your DM can limit you a little bit by making it so you have to find the poison, or you have to harvest the poison. They actually have rules in the DMG about how to harvest poison. And if you harvest incorrectly, you can be affected by the poison, which is always fun. Or being able to buy it. There may be laws against owning certain poisons. You may have to go through a black market. There's a lot of different ways for your DM to make it really, really interesting. But if you are a shady character and you are not considering using poison in some way, shape, or form, you really are missing out, because it can really, really change the tide of battle pretty massively. And again, a lot of people don't even think about it. That entire page of stuff in the Player's Handbook and that section in the Dungeon Master's Guide, nobody thinks about. They look at the magic items and weapons, is why they have the Dungeon Master's Guide, is all those magic items in there, and they completely ignore an entire section on poisons. And then, in the PHB, they look at the weapons, they look at the armor, they completely ignore the kind of miscellaneous stuff that can have major impacts on the game. And for creative players, can really change how combat works, how you even it could even change how you approach searching a dungeon and things like that. Like, I don't know a lot of parties that will set up ambushes and stuff like that, simply because they don't think about that. They think of the Baldur's Gate style dungeon crawling, where you're just wandering around and then enemies are there and you get attacked. But if you scout ahead, if you're secretive, if you're playing smart, you can change battle significantly by leading enemies into ambushes, making them run across caltrops and stuff like that they can't see, or ball bearings, or using alchemist fire and oil to kind of corral them and make it so that they have to go through certain areas, things like that. Or using poison to change the action economy, or rendering some of them unconscious and using manacles. When you use a combination of poison and manacles, you are in a great place. You can use drow poison, knock them out, go over, attach manacles to them, and then they are kind of useless for the rest of battle. They can't attack you, they can't use their weapons and things like that until they break out of it, and a DC 20 strength check or a DC 20 dexterity check is not something to laugh at. So when you combine these things together, you get some really, really interesting, really, really creative kind of fights. And I think the Dungeon Master's Guide and the Player's Handbook does not give specifics on how they work as far as like rules and everything on purpose. These are items that are designed to be used creatively. They're designed to be kind of ruled by the DM. Okay, we're going to say that it does this and this and this. So yes, that is my top 5 underused 5th edition items. For the wonderful person that left the comment that for the life of me I can't find right now, because a lot of you guys have been commenting and stuff like that. I hope that this is what you were hoping for, where I explain, caltrops are more than just little pointy things or D4s. D4, oh, if you've never stepped on a D4 before, oh, it is a horrible experience. But anyway, caltrops are more than just pointy things. They are ways to control the battlefield. They're ways to manipulate the action economy. They are incredibly useful items that nobody ever thinks about. The same is true about ball bearings and manacles and alchemist fire and holy water. These are all things that are massively useful if you are creative and if you understand that they're there. And a lot of people just either don't know that they exist or don't care. And they really shouldn't. They're really awesome. So anyway, that's going to be all for me today. A little bit of a shorter video because I am super, super under the weather. I have had the world's worst headache all day. So as always, I am trying to hit these new goals and everything. So please, 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 if you're not yet, please subscribe to the channel. Every subscription helps. Please like the video, comment the video. That makes it easier for other people to be able to find it naturally. It'll show up in recommended videos a little bit better, stuff like that. All of these things are useful. Also, in the comments, if you want to have me do a video on a certain subject, I am slowly but surely working through all the requests that you guys have made in the comments. So keep requesting them. I will keep creating videos for you guys on the subjects that you really like. Right now, D&D is the thing for everyone, and that's what everyone is excited about. And I love making D&D content, don't get me wrong. So if you guys want more specific D&D content, if you want more in-depth guides to certain classes and things like that, let me know in the comments. If you would like me to start talking about other things, I'm probably going to have at least one video where I talk about music eventually, because music is a huge part of my life. I've been a musician since the 5th grade. I've been a singer for most of my life. I've taken professional voice lessons. I minored in vocal performance when I was in college. I was a professional jazz singer for almost 2 years. Music is a huge part of my life. So if you guys want, me to talk about music and stuff like that, I'm more than happy. Or management or marketing or economics, these are all things that fascinate me and I really, really enjoy. And I'm more than happy to create videos on it. It's entirely based on what you guys are interested in. So please, if you have ideas for stuff that you want to see me talk about, or you have questions about, 5th edition D&D or any of the previous editions, I know the most about 5th edition, but I've got a pretty good working knowledge of everything going back to right around 1st edition and basic is where I start getting fuzzy. So again, please, 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 let me know what you guys want to see. Otherwise, again, that is all for me today, and I will see you guys next time, all right? Bye-bye.